Sometimes you catch yourself opening your phone for just a couple of minutes, and somehow slipping out of time. You can't even clearly say what you were watching. There is just a stream. Images, faces, thoughts, fragments of other people's lives. And when you finally put the phone down, it doesn't feel like you've rested. If anything, it feels like something inside you is quieter, but not in a good way. Like there's a little less of you. And in those moments, it's easy to think it's your fault. That you're not focused enough. Not disciplined enough. From the outside, it often looks that way. Someone who can't hold attention, who gets tired too quickly, who's distracted all the time. But there's something subtle here that usually gets missed. This isn't weakness. It's adaptation. There's a state a lot of people live in without really noticing. And it's rarely explained properly. Because from the outside it looks like a behavior problem, but underneath, it's a shift in how attention actually works. There's more happening here than it seems. When your brain is constantly exposed to rapid stimulation, short videos, notifications, endless switching, it begins to reorganize itself at that pace. Not because it's good for you, but because it's repeated. There are studies showing that frequent task switching reduces the brain's ability to sustain focus. But in real life, it doesn't feel like a cognitive deficit. It feels like scattered thinking, mental fatigue, a loss of depth. Like your thoughts have become shorter, and your inner space smaller. Over time, your brain starts choosing what's easier to process, not what's more fulfilling. Quick spikes, fast signals, minimal effort. That's not really a conscious choice. It's how the system adjusts. And if you look a little deeper, this doesn't always start in adulthood. For many people, the habit of constant stimulation forms much earlier. When silence gets filled immediately, when pauses start to feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, and the nervous system learns a simple rule. Emptiness is something to escape. Eventually, this becomes automatic, almost invisible, and that's where a strange conflict begins. You want to focus, but it's hard to tolerate the absence of stimulation. You want to rest, but stillness feels uneasy, and the more you try to pull yourself together, the more resistance you feel, because you're pushing against a system that has already adapted. And it's important to say this clearly. This doesn't make you worse, and it doesn't mean there's some correct version of you that you need to force yourself back into. People process the world differently. Nervous systems adapt in different ways. There's no judgment here, just an understanding of what's happening. And from that understanding, something begins to shift. Not through force, not through pressure, but through small changes in how your attention is used. When attention has been fragmented for a long time, it can't instantly return to depth, but it can expand gradually. Sometimes it starts with something very simple, a slightly slower pace, a little less input, even small gaps between stimulation. At first, those gaps can feel strange, even a bit uncomfortable. That makes sense. Your system has been used to constant input, but inside those small pauses, something begins to come back. The ability to stay with one thought just a little longer, a little more calmly, and along with that, a different kind of feeling returns. Quieter, but more stable. There's another layer to this that isn't talked about often. The same sensitivity that makes you more vulnerable to overload is often connected to depth, to noticing subtle things, to feeling more, to perceiving complexity. It's two sides of the same system. What overwhelms you can also be what allows you to see more. And there's always a trade-off. The more sensitive the system, the more it needs the right conditions. The more depth there is, the more recovery matters. That's not a flaw. It's a structure. And at some point, it becomes less about fixing yourself, and more about creating conditions where that structure can function well. Sometimes that looks almost invisible. Fewer switches, a bit more quiet, a slightly slower rhythm, no pressure, no demand to become better, just a different way of relating to your attention. And slowly, the system responds. Not instantly, but honestly, you start to feel depth again. Not as intense as fast stimulation, but more real. And maybe the most important part of all this is realizing that this isn't your brain being destroyed. It's your brain adapting to an environment that moves too fast. Your brain isn't broken, it's adjusted. And when the environment shifts, even slightly, it begins to shift back. There's no rush in that process. No single correct way. Just a gradual return to a state where it feels a little easier to be inside your own mind. And if any of this feels familiar, there's probably more beneath it. And noticing that is where things quietly begin to change.